Hi, everyone. Welcome to the information session for the Ontario Creates IP Fund. This presentation will focus on linear content, which includes feature films and digital series. My name is Amrit Randhava, and I'm the lead consultant for feature film development. I am joined by Anna Nualo, lead consultant on feature film production for drama, animation, and documentaries, and Danielle Hebert, the lead consultant on digital series for both development and production. Today's information session will include a presentation followed by a Q&A period. There are quite a lot of you joining in today, so I kindly ask that you enter your questions in the Q&A function on Zoom and not the chat so that we don't lose track of it. We also ask that you please hold off on asking questions until the end of the presentation, as your questions may be answered in one of the slides. We've allocated about 20 minutes for questions at the end of the session, and we'll try to answer as many as possible in that time frame. Please try to keep the questions general and not project specific. If you have any questions that are very specific or nuanced, or if we aren't able to get to your question, you can always reach out to us. Our contact information will be up on the screen. This presentation covers 4 different application types. So when asking a question, please let us know which of the 4 application types your question pertains to, as the answer may vary depending on what you're applying with. So let us know if you're applying for development for film, development for digital series, production for film, or production for digital series. And now I'm just going to turn off my camera. We're going to get to the main presentation, and I'll see you all again at the end of it. Back in 2023, we launched our strategic plan with a goal to fuel growth, which means supporting Ontario's creative industry companies by investing in the creation and distribution of intellectual property, enabling business development and facilitating support within and across sectors. The way we do that is through modern, responsive, and informed programs. And that's how the IP Fund was created. As part of developing this new program, we did an extensive program review, which some of you might have participated in, and surveys, and really wanted to make sure we could find the best way to ensure the ongoing growth and success of your companies. Before the fund launched for the first time earlier this year, we had 2 separate funds that were broken down into varying streams, as you can see on the screen. These funds, the Film Fund and the IDM Fund, are no longer available. We now support all screen content creation under a singular fund, and that is comprised of program streams for both linear and interactive content. You'll see that the bulk of the support will go into production investments. To answer a question we received a lot during our Cycle 1 launch in January, no, there isn't any new money for this program. The total amount of commitment varies year to year, but is approximately $12 million. The funding split is notional, but will be roughly in the same proportion as it currently is between linear and interactive content. And it will be delivered in similar proportion to our previous programs, so linked to our evaluation criteria and the capacity of recipients from each program to contribute to our organizational goals. We are actively reviewing our marketing and business development programs, and while that is underway, we will continue to offer them for 1 more year in their current format. The objectives of the fund are tied back to Ontario Creates' mandate to drive economic growth. The goals are linked to our KPI framework and will be flexible between interactive and linear content in terms of expectations for impact on the province in spend and jobs versus company growth ROI that may be more focused on revenues. All funding through these programs will be issued via transfer payments, which is Ontario Creates speak for grants. This is a pretty substantial change for the film sector. Previously, all film funding from Ontario Creates was issued as an interest-free loan, but now under the IP Fund, all funding will be issued as non-repayable grants. Now, you may be wondering, will this grant grind down tax credits? The answer is yes, it will. But this is not a new change for those of you who have come into the Film Fund in previous years. The Film Fund was not a bona fide loan. It was always considered as assistance, so the Film Fund also did grind down the tax credits. Before starting an application, please read both the guidelines and the program policies. These documents are your main source of information for the IP Fund, so please, please, please read them. I cannot overstate how important that is. And for previous Film Fund applicants, please take special note of the program policies. This may be new to you as it did not previously apply to the Film Fund, but will apply to the IP Fund. It contains vital information, so please go through the documents very carefully. Also, please ensure you are using the most recent versions of our templates for your application. You can always find the most recent versions on our program page. We do sometimes tweak them cycle to cycle to catch any errors we might find, any miscalculations, or just to streamline things some more. So always, always, always use the version on the website rather than what you may have from previous cycles. And this information session is being recorded and will be made available on our website at a later date. If you require this presentation in French, please let us know and we will be more than happy to assist you.
Okay, so the following slides will cover eligibility. And although this presentation focuses on linear, I want to draw your attention to the fact that there is a separate information session specifically for interactive. So under the IP Fund, eligible projects have been recategorized and refined. So feature films and digital series are together under the linear content stream, and we've realigned our expectations and value proposition for linear content. So there will be things that will be new for those that are familiar on the feature film side, and then those that are familiar on the digital series side. So we'll point things out along the way in this presentation. So who is eligible? There are two parts to this. There is the applicant company, and then there's the producers. So for the production company, um, must be Canadian owned and controlled organization. It must be incorporated in Ontario, or it can be incorporated federally and then registered in Ontario. If it's not incorporated at the time of the application, you have to be prepared to incorporate immediately if your application is successful. So the fact that you no longer need to be incorporated at the application stage is new for feature film producers. It also, and then just like the definition of Ontario based, you'll find a more detailed definition of it in our program's policy. The company must also be able to demonstrate a principal place of business in Ontario. And if the company has more than 365 days of operation, it must have um, that Ontario place of business for at least 1 year prior to our deadline. And as always, you must be in good standing with Ontario Creates. If the applicant is successful with us, then they must continue to have a principal place of business in Ontario for the duration of this funding period. And again, you will see more details, more definitions in the Ontario Creates program policies. Now, what's new for feature film producers is the applications should be submitted by the primary corporate entity and not the single purpose production company. So even if you've already incorporated that single purpose and you've transferred copyright from the parent company to the single purpose vehicle, we're still saying that you have to submit the application under that primary corporate company. There are two spots there where you can upload the incorporation documents and the shareholder information for the primary company. And then there's another section there where you can also upload the same documents for the single purpose company. If you're successful, we will contract with the single purpose vehicle, not the primary applicant. So you don't have to worry about that. And we're saying this because since we're moving away from recoupment, there are now corporate level considerations and requirements, including financial statements. More information is coming up on a future slide, but just for you to understand that the single purpose vehicle that was just incorporated will not be able to provide those financial statements. So that's why we're saying the primary or the parent company should be the applicant because they will most likely be in a position to be able to provide those financial statements. A reminder that in the case of co-productions, whether it's interprovincial or international, the applicant to us is always the Ontario company. So now the second part of eligibility is that the individual producers must be Ontario residents and Canadian citizens within the definition of the Citizenship Act, or permanent resident within the definition of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. The individual that's identified as the lead Ontario producer must be able to demonstrate a portion of IP ownership of the project. In other words, that individual who is noted as the lead Ontario producer on the application can't be a producer for hire. Plus, in addition to what I just said about the lead Ontario producer, that person must also meet the following requirements. So for feature film, they have to have produced, they have to have a producer credit on a dramatic or documentary feature film that was theatrically released in Canada, or a television movie or dramatic or documentary series, or two 1 hour documentaries that have been broadcast in Canada. For digital series, you either meet the criteria that I just said about feature film, or have previously produced a season of a digital series publicly released to an audience. And then you have to look at the minimum episodes and exploitation requirements in our guidelines. Or you could have completed a Futures Forward training program. These allowances are only for those applying for the digital series. And we do not consider co-producer, associate producer, or executive producer credits to have met this requirement. So we always refer to the producer credit as, producer with a capital P. If you, as the lead Ontario producer, do not meet that producer credit, meaning you don't have that you haven't produced a feature film that was theatrically released in Canada or the other things that I mentioned. If that is your case, but you must still be an Ontario resident and Canadian citizen, we can consider an application from those that don't meet that applicant producer requirement, provided that you bring on an Ontario-based Canadian executive producer who does meet those qualifications. If they are attached to the project, then that can qualify you to be able to apply to us. So this is to help emerging producers. The applicants must seek pre-approval of the qualifying executive producer by Ontario Creates prior to application. So the pre-approval must be sought by the appropriate consultant. So for feature film production, whether it's drama or documentary, you come to me, I'm Anna. If it is feature film development, then you seek that from AMRET. And then if it is digital series, whether it's development or production, you will be speaking to Danielle and asking her for a pre-approval. The qualifying executive producer must have signed a letter outlining their involvement in and the commitment to the project, and this will form part of your application. So moving on now to the three program streams, we're going to start with production. So this slide is high-level overview. We're going to be diving more into details for the linear stream over the next few slides. So just to highlight some of the key details between the previous funds and this new program, what's new is budget thresholds for feature documentary is now lowered from $600,000 down to $500,000. And we're now imposing a minimum budget threshold for digital series. So that is new to both feature film documentaries and then also digital series producers. What's also new for feature film docs is the ask. Previously, it was capped at $150,000. It is now increased to $200,000 for feature documentary. So that is something else that is new for on the feature doc side. So let's get into more details on the next slides. Okay, so all projects must meet the following to be eligible. For feature films, must have a minimum length of 75 minutes. On the digital side, you have to have a minimum of 3 episodes. Principal photography cannot begin prior to application submission. Don't confuse that with the application deadline. So our deadline is September 25th. You can apply today. We are open, and then you can go to camera tomorrow. We do not offer finishing funds, which is why we say that principal photography cannot have begun prior to application. Principal photography must take place in Ontario, with the exception of factual content and co-productions. This requirement is new to digital series producers. Productions must be CanCon. The applicant or the subsidiary must be the company that has the rights to the project. So what's new to both feature film producers and digital series is at this point, at the application stage, we are asking only for a summary of the chain of title documents or a legal opinion. You can submit that. Um, Something that shows that the applicant or a subsidiary of the applicant, for those that have incorporated a single purpose company already, that one of those companies holds copyright. If you are successful with a jury, we will ask you to supply all of the chain of title documents as evidence that you have the rights to this project. Everything must be verified before we can commit. But so basically what's happening is the paperwork is being pushed on to the back end and only for the successful applicants because it was quite daunting to go through all of those chain of title documents for every single applicant. And I just want to touch on the importance of market interest. And I do recommend submitting a marketing plan for all applications. So if you have a Canadian distributor, you don't need to, on the drama side, you don't need to submit a marketing plan. But my suggestion is that even with a Canadian distributor, you're better off submitting that global marketing plan. And we have information in the guidelines as to what it is that we're looking for in that document. Essentially, what we're saying is that we want you to show us that there is an audience out there for your film and that you have a plan on how to reach them. So just to break down the exploitation, because it is different depending on the budget levels and depending on the stream, whether it's drama or doc. So for feature length drama, with productions that have a budget of 3.5 million and over, you must have a Canadian distributor attached to the project. That is mandatory. We want to see that the Canadian distributor is going to commercially exploit the film in Canada and internationally if appropriate. So again, for that budget level, it is mandatory. If you do not have a Canadian distributor and your budget is more than 3.5 million, you won't go through to jury. We are in line with Telefilm on that budget level. For dramas that are less than 3.5 million, if you don't have a confirmed Canadian distributor, then you must include that marketing plan that demonstrates how the film will be commercially exploited in Canada and again internationally if appropriate. But to clarify again, even though the Canadian distributor is not mandatory at this budget level, the marketing plan is mandatory if there's no Canadian distributor attached at this budget level. But again, we recommend that even with a Canadian distributor at this budget level, you're better off submitting that marketing plan to us. So for feature documentaries, documentaries may apply with either a Canadian distributor or a Canadian broadcaster or a streaming service available in Canada. And you must include a marketing plan that demonstrates how the film will be commercially exploited in Canada and internationally if that's what's happening there too. So again, this is where the marketing plan is mandatory, and what is a trigger is either Canadian distributor, the broadcaster, or the streamer. This is all under Appendix 1 in our guidelines, so you'll be able to see more information there. Now, for digital series, acceptable online platforms include subscription-based video on demand, advertising-based video on demand, free ad-supported streaming TV, hybrid video on demand, transactional video on demand, or other models, as long as the platform makes productions commercially available for viewing by the public via download or streaming. And again, you can take a look at Appendix 1 in our guidelines.
Okay, so as you can see here, in terms of production financing, the tiers are now more closely linked to what we've been able to provide historically. So we ultimately wanted to give producers more predictability and help with planning rather than pulling back on our investments from the funding requests that we receive. So digital series, for those who didn't know, is moving from the interactive digital media program, which is either Anna or Emmerich mentioned, is no longer, where thresholds were different. So this is something to pay attention to. The 30% is to help us ensure that work can still be financed in Ontario. And we will look at exceptions for maximum requests for higher budgets. So thinking 2 million plus. We would have to have a conversation about that prior to your application. We did have a separate diversity enhancement stream in the past for Film Fund, and this is now part of the overall scoring criteria that you will see later in the presentation. Digital series are used to this format. As always, we are a last-in funder. We need to see 70% in place in terms of financing, and this is minus funding under consideration from other government partners. And important for your eligibility, we need at least one confirmed third-party investment for drama and animation features and third-party confirmed financing or demonstrated market interest for documentaries and digital series. So that is mandatory and will help determine your eligibility. In terms of how you give us that market interest, in your marketing plan, well, sorry, it could be in your marketing plan or via signed and meaningful letter of interest from a third party. The 70% requirement is new for digital series producers that are more used to how we structure things in the IDM fund. So just a tip to calculate that 70% minimum financing requirement of your confirmed financing. You're going to exclude the Ontario Creates request or any financing under review from other recognized industry funding programs within the corresponding deadline or timeframe as ours. So think Telefilm, Bell Fund, Independent Production Fund, Canada Media Fund, NOHFC, Shaw Rocket Fund, Eurimage, etc. So you're going to exclude that and then calculate from the remaining total how much you have confirmed financing. If it's above 70%, you're good to go. All of your financing will need to be confirmed within 16 weeks of the application deadline and in advance of Ontario Creates conditional award letter. Fully financed projects, excluding Ontario Creates, supported with the appropriate commitment documentation at the time of the application, will be prioritized in the decision process. If successful, additional documentation will be required to confirm project ownership and financing, so make sure that is ready to go. Moving on to development. So the projects that come in for development must be intended to meet the same production eligibility as discussed above. So for example, 75 minutes or longer for feature films and that 3-episode minimum for digital series. Plans for exploitation must be in line with the production requirements as well. You'll see here that that thread of market interest continues. It's the same definition, a third-party investment, a letter of interest, or an audience development plan. You could also show interest for the original IP or the writer's or director's past work, for example, so that investment is not mandatory, but you do need to demonstrate some sort of market interest, or the project will be deemed either not eligible or it won't be very competitive. Funding levels are based on your budgets. So it's a request up to a maximum of 25,000, capped at 50% of the Ontario spend. And all financing in addition to Ontario rates must be confirmed at the application, with a few exceptions. For example, at our spring deadline, often projects coming in that have digital series are also applying to the Independent Production Fund, Bell Slate, and things like that. All right, so eligible applicants for development are the exact same as the production criteria. You can't start your activities before the application is submitted, and it must be completed, the activities must be completed within 15 months of notification. New for Film Fund applicants, applicants may only receive funding once per project. So all stages are allowed in this application. And previously we had split it up into sort of 3 different stages that you could apply for. Now it's only once per project. Understanding that this is a big change that is coming in the middle of project's development cycle. If the project previously received support under the Film Fund Development Program for one stage, then you can receive funds one more time for that project via the IP Fund Development Program. And just as a refresher, those phases that we previously related to were story optioning, first option or option renewal, treatment to final draft, and polish and package. So your activities that you apply for under the IP fund can include one or all of these phases if it suits the project. Expenses may include, but are not limited to what you see here on the screen, and there is a longer list in the guidelines. Again, just a reminder, one development investment per project, with the exception of those who have previously received Film Fund development. They can receive it one more time for a different set of development activities for the same project. So for both production and development, there's 2 opportunities to apply. Our earlier deadline this year was April 15th, and our upcoming deadline is September 25th. Remember that the deadline each day is 5 p.m. sharp. We will not accept applications after 5 o'clock on our deadline days. And just an update for those who are used to Film Fund, we only have 2 deadlines for both production and development. Development is no longer a continuous cycle. We are also adhering to those 2 deadlines. Applications are now open for cycle 2 of the fund. And again, that's a September 25th deadline. This will be the final deadline of this fiscal year.
To help ease the administrative burden on applicants, we are collecting only the most essential application materials and will conduct further due diligence for those that are awarded funding. Production applicants will need to provide ROI figures from previous Ontario Creates funded activities. And development applicants are required to provide proof of market viability. Applicants for both development and production are required to provide proof of Ontario IP ownership, a profile of diversity of the team, voice and story, and a budget and breakdown of Ontario expenditures. One of our application requirements is financial statements. This is a new requirement for feature film projects. As part of the move to grants, we will now be doing transfer payment agreements, which comes with a different set of risk analysis methods, as Anna mentioned, and that is where this requirement stems from. Applicants requesting more than $15,000 are required to provide confirmation engagement financial statements for the past 2 fiscal years, and they need to have a standard business or accounting format. We don't expect you to go back in time. This is a going forward requirement. We can issue waivers this year for companies that don't have financial statements for the previous 2 years, and the waiver can be submitted as part of your application in place of financial statements. To request a waiver, you can reach out to the appropriate program consultant, but please do so well before the program deadline. Waivers won't be issued same day, and as we get closer to the deadline date, we see a substantial increase in the volume of inquiries that we receive, which means longer turnaround times. So if you need a waiver, you'll want to set yourself up for success by requesting one early.
So for the evaluation process, something that I always tell producers, this is a very competitive fund and it is oversubscribed. So I want you to keep that in mind. And what we always say is your application is only as good as what you're up against. So you can have a great project, but still something else edged up higher than yours. So projects are evaluated in the condition that they are submitted. There is no deficiency review. This is new for the digital producers. So the film fund producers that always work that way. So for step one, there is an eligibility and completeness timeline that is simplified and reduced. Notifications will go out letting you know if your project will move forward to jury or not. So this is where we say, yes, you are eligible, yes, you are complete, and you can move forward, or you're not eligible or you're incomplete, that a jury can't make a determination, so we will not put it through to jury. Step two, this is only for those that were determined eligible and complete. There will be a fuller jury review and a business side review. So Ontario Creates will accept a one-page update letter prior to the jury meeting because we understand that when you apply and then a couple months later, by the time the jury meets, that your project will have progressed. And really, the point of that letter is to highlight certain things like financing, cast, and any kind of schedule updates. Basically, we want to know if you applied with holes in your financing, are they now fulfilled? Did all of those funders come in and say yes to your project? Because we are a last in financier, so we need to make sure about that. If you have an A-lister cast, let us know. The other thing too is if you've already gone to camera, this is something that the jury will need to know because this means that it's the only opportunity with us. And so the jury will have to have a conversation around that as well, which is not a guarantee because there are numerous one-page update letters that the jury receives that says, and principal photography is complete. So you will not be the only one. You should have an answer by us within 16 weeks from the deadline. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is an important priority, and that's reflected clearly in the evaluation criteria to help elevate projects that meet the provincial definition and industry gaps. There's going to be more on this on the next slide, but I just wanted to highlight the intersection with scoring criteria. And please ensure it's included in your application for scoring purposes. Again, the decision criteria grid is in the guidelines, so you are able to see exactly how things break down. So this is the decision criteria grid. Basically, it is 35% is the benefit to the Ontario economy. There is a document that we ask you to submit. It's called the Schedule of Minimum Commitment of Ontario Expenditures. And it basically gives us a snapshot of how much money you're going to be spending in Ontario, how many Ontarians you're going to be employing, and for how many weeks. So it gives you that snapshot of the economic benefit that your project will have for Ontario. And that's weighted quite high at 35%. Then 20% is feasibility and risks, and we look at the clarity of activities and deliverables, the accuracy of, the budget, the strength of the financing contributions, the suitability of the project planning and timelines. We want to make sure that basically the budget that you've submitted matches the script that you submitted. They don't give us a script that's really with a $10 million budget, but you say, oh, you can do it for 1 million, because that would send red flags to the jury. The other one is the track record and ability to deliver the proposed project. So we are looking at the company experience with similar projects, the capacity, the skills, the knowledge and expertise of the team. We're also looking at diversity among senior leadership, staff, and other contract employees, and evidence of company policies and our initiatives that support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we also look at creative strength. So we do look at the potential to result in a high quality project. We look at the creative merit, the comprehensive articulation of the project, and again, evidence that the project supports, reflects, and amplifies diversity with respect to content and audience. So that altogether equals the 100%. So this is the document that I mentioned that gives us a snapshot of what the economic impact your project will have for the province. This is the only document that we specifically ask you to fill out. Everything else that we ask from you are documents that are industry standard that you have to submit to other broadcasters, to other funding agencies. But this one document is the one that is worth that 35% score. So you must use our template. You cannot use anything else. It must be complete and it must be accurate. You'll also indicate the weeks of work that your project will be bringing to the province. And also, there are questions in the application form that, there are questions in the application form in terms of, like, they're going to ask about number of weeks and jobs and so on and so forth. It's probably best for you to fill out this form. That way you will know what the answer is when you're filling out the application. So I would recommend that you do start here before you actually get into the application form. And then development has a budget template that breaks out your Ontario costs as well. So we do have that. And yeah, I think that is it for the evaluation.
Great. So in terms of the payment schedule, once you're successful, so it's not on here, but for development, it pays 100% upon contract execution and $0 on a mandatory final report. This is the payment drawdown for production for both feature film and digital series. Especially for those used to our IDM fund, this is a different structure for the digital series folks. So for successful applicants, additional documentation will be required to confirm project ownership and financing. Once all of the outstanding issues are confirmed, we'll move towards a conditional award letter, which holds our commitment to the project. Should you not be able to fulfill the finance and ownership obligations, you may be asked to reapply once the project is able to fulfill those conditional terms. Ontario Creates provides the award through drawdowns based on the following milestones. So on execution of contract, it's 50% of the award. Please note that we will execute close to the start of principal photography to close with Ontario Greats all long form, fully executed financing agreements with other funders and financiers must be provided. This contracting process is all done through the OAP. The completion of principal photography or key animation, we will then pay out another 40% credits. So this is an important one, but it is a $0 drawdown. But we will close out this report upon credit approval. All the credit requirements that you need will be in the contract. And then the final 10% is paid out on the delivery of a production audit and your final deliverables. Please see the program policies for changes to project delivery for those used to the film fund requirements. The audit requirement is dependent on the amount of the award. So you may just need to do a final cost report with a notarized affidavit. Check out our program policies for all those details. So the last program that we wanted to tell you about is Futures Forward. So we completed a gap analysis and we're going to be expanding this program this year that in past years has been very successful in the IDM sector. So the goal is to fill a gap for emerging and equity deserving producers who have limited opportunities to access funding in professional programs. Eligible applicants to this grant will be those who have completed relevant industry training programs. A list of those will be shared later this summer. We are getting close to finding that, and we'll be hopefully sharing that by beginning of September. The program itself will launch in the fall of 2025. And in the past we've partnered with CMF. There's a potential to partner with other funders as we have on the IDM side. So just keep an eye out. Everything's still being sorted out and finalized. So give it a few weeks and feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in this grant. Okay, so just a couple more notes. Applicants who have disabilities, people who are deaf, and people who face barriers in accessing technology may request alternate application formats and/or funds to support application prep. Successful projects may be eligible for additional funds to support onset training and mentorship. If you're successful, we'll speak to those applicants regarding that onset training. Nothing for you to do until you're asked. No need to indicate anything in your application. We will reach out.
Okay, to recap, one of the biggest changes for feature film producers is that the contribution is a grant and no longer coupable. There are revised funding caps affecting feature film documentaries and digital series. Applications are evaluated as is. This is new for digital series producers. You will not be able to submit additional or revised documents after the deadline. There are 2 deadlines per fiscal. This is new for feature film producers who had 3 deadlines per year under Film Fund, and development is no longer a continuous fund as it was previously. It has, previously it was continuous with 1 deadline, and now it has 2 deadlines a year. So please review the decision criteria grid that you will find in the guidelines. It shows you how the projects are evaluated, and note the diversity, equity, and inclusion elements. The guidelines have changed, so please review them. Also, please note that the program policies that's new for feature film producers. So please familiarize yourself with them, because we have the guidelines and then we have the program policies, and together they are part of this program. Please ensure that you register, that you have an account through our online application portal. Take a look at the application and you can start to gather documents that you will need. You can upload in a draft And then it allows you to review. That way you make sure that you have uploaded the correct documents, that you have uploaded all the mandatory documents, and that you have shown that you have met all of the requirements. The the portal is open now for you to apply. Don't wait to the end. If you require technical help while you're working on the application, there's this help button that will take you to our IT department. However, if you apply too close to the deadline date and time, there's no guarantee that they will be able to help you in a timely manner. So this is why we really stress the importance of applying beforehand and not waiting until the last day. So all applications must be submitted before, like, by 5 o'clock on the day of the deadline. So any other tips I'm trying to think of? Okay, we'll talk about administrative notes. So if unsuccessful, even from previous deadlines, including Film Fund and IDM, you must have a feedback call with the appropriate consultant to discuss deficiencies in order for you to reapply. This is so that you're able to come back with a stronger application. Each project may be submitted a maximum of 3 times, and this also includes the previous fund. So if you were already rejected twice under Film Fund, for example, and you want to come in under IP Fund, that will be your third and final time. In some exceptional circumstances, a project may reapply a 4th time. You would have to get special permission from us. We don't grant it very often, but full transparency, we have done it. Also, there's a restriction of no more than 2 applications from the same producer per cycle per stream. So that is a maximum of 2 for production and 2 for development per deadline.
Okay, so before the Q&A, and also I see there's only 2 questions in the Q&A, so now's your chance. A reminder of what you need to read and download before applying. So everything is on our website. So guidelines, program policies, the SHMO template, development budget template if you're applying to development. Again, everything's on our website, OntarioCreates.ca, toggle to the linear section of the IP fund. And you can apply at apply.ontariocreates.ca. And a reminder, our deadlines, of course, one is past April 15th, and the upcoming important one of September 25th, 2025 at 5 p.m. sharp.